Hello my friends, this is Dwight from Forest Glory 700 coming back at you with another video. And I'm just doing another quick video. I don't understand why in my community black people are so obsessed with being a victim, especially at the hands of the white man. And let me explain real briefly. I'm actually at work right now, and I was having a conversation with a coworker that's new to the company, and I was relieving him of his duty and taking over the vehicle. And so we were talking, and as I was driving the vehicle, there was a young Asian girl that was running alongside the bus with her family. Well, the family wasn't running, but she was running. A young girl, like maybe 3 or 4 years old. So I was driving very slowly because the sidewalk is right next to the curb, and I was concerned that the child might trip and lose her balance and unfortunately run under the vehicle. So I was watching her very closely, and so was my coworker, and so we were talking about it, and I was saying to him that, it's so important that parents keep a very close eye on their child, because things like that can happen. The parent shouldn't even be allowing the child to be running along with the bus that's in motion and is passing her. So he was agreeable with me, and we're having that conversation about just basically common sense stuff, and anyways, he mentioned that you're not even allowed to spank your kids nowadays because you can get in trouble with the government. And I agreed with him. I go, yeah, that's very true, but I'm like, what, if my child requires a spanking, he or she's going to get it regardless of what the government says. So from there he started to mention about police officers who are allowed to use sticks or batons to beat children, and that's okay. And his reference was specific to white police officers using batons or sticks to beat black children or black people. And I really didn't understand the parallel, because I didn't understand how we went from that to talking about racial injustice as I guess he perceived it. So we started talking, and he started mentioning how in the States police officers are clearly racist, and that because they're not familiar with the black community, they tend to act first and think later. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we need to be careful with that. What you may be referring to might be isolated incidents where those things occur, and it might be videotaped and we see the aftermath, but we don't see all the things leading up to that particular event. So I'm like, what, in those cases, those are isolated cases in the United States. They're not the norm. You don't have police officers running out on the streets and grabbing black people or black youth and just starting to beat the living daylights out of them. At least that's not my perception. I've grown up in Canada, and I've never had a negative encounter with law enforcement. The encounters that I have had with law enforcement, I've been compliant, and I've never ever felt like my safety or my life was in jeopardy at any time. And he was agreeable with me for the time that he's lived in Canada. I don't think he's been in this country nearly as long as I have, but he had concurred with me that his experience with law enforcement in Canada has been positive. But then he referred back again to the United States. And I'm not sure if he's ever lived in the States. I don't believe he has. I think he's more basing it on what he's heard and what he's viewed on YouTube, because he mentioned that he's watched videos and how blacks are mistreated by law enforcement. So I said, well, again, we have to look at these situations individually. We have to ask the question, is this the norm? Is this what is occurring on a routine basis in regards to blacks walking down the street and being accosted by law enforcement on a regular and a daily basis, and being beaten and whipped and so forth? So I said to him, you know what, we got to look at those cases as isolated cases, but they're not the norm. What are the percentages that we're referring to as it relates to the abuses by law enforcement? I go, yeah, there's going to be abuses by law enforcement, that there's no doubt about it, but those are in the minority of cases, not the majority of cases. And he proceeded to continue to try to convince me of his position, which I wasn't buying. I simply made it clear that a lot of times events or situations are escalated between law enforcement and black people or people in the black community, and those situations often tend to escalate because, in my opinion, blacks sometimes have an emotional response to the directives that are given to them by law enforcement. And my mindset is very simple: comply, with law enforcement in terms of what they're directing you to do. As long as your personal safety or life is not in jeopardy, comply, and then follow through with it by filing a report against that particular officer if you feel that they've been mistreating you or if that they've had some type of bias against you based on your perception of the situation. But for the most part, comply. Just simply comply, follow through with what law enforcement is calling you to do as long as it does not jeopardize your safety, and then file a report afterwards. But in the whole conversation that I had with this coworker, I'm constantly thinking to myself, why is this always about racism? Why is it always about a victim mentality and that, whites are just out to get blacks? That's just their motivation for anything that they do, especially in law enforcement. They just want to brutalize and beat up blacks and mistreat them and so forth. Are there individuals within law enforcement that might have that mindset? Yes, and I'd say they're few and far between. And if there are let's say, law enforcement departments in the United States in certain counties or certain states or regions or locations where that may be the case, you would hear about it, in my opinion. But either way, it always baffles me that blacks constantly want to play the victim at the hands of the white man, and at the same time are reaping all the benefits of living in westernized nations. Go figure. Anyways, this is Dwight from Forest Glory 700, coming back at you with another video. Have a great day. Goodbye.